Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast with Amy Wheeler. I've had the good fortune to travel the world learning about yoga therapy on a global scale, and I've been able to meet many of the leaders in the field along the way. I want to share with you what I'm learning as I interview our colleagues from around the world. My hope is that together we can reduce suffering of all sentient beings through our work as yoga teachers and yoga therapists. Hello, this is Amy Wheeler from Optimal State Yoga Therapy School, and I am about to have the most amazing conversation with Rachelle PEAN, spelled Rachelle, and last name PEAN. We are going to talk about what it means to embrace the unknown and to move from a way of very linear thinking into a place where you don't know what's going to happen. You have a lot of curiosity, you have willingness, but you really are being asked in your life to kind of drop down and get grounded and trust and just watch what emerges. And the way that this conversation has potential to unfold, it's about when Rochelle decided to leave her job as a social worker, where she felt kind of disconnected, that she was moving too fast, that the pace of her work with her clients did not support the pace at which her internal clock moves. And she was being asked to label and diagnose and fix. And how did she move from there into a place of inner safety, curiosity, and eventually moving towards opening her own business, which is called Rooted in Albany, New York. And it's a space for Black and Brown people to have a safe space to become well and to be. So we're going to tell all about that story. And, one of the things that struck me as I was listening to Rochelle was, this is exactly what we teach in our Optimal State Business course. And it's so hard to get people to do. People want the linear, they want the guarantee, they want to know what's going to happen next. And for most of the students that we teach, having that sense of curiosity and awe and wonder and letting it unfold, it's really, really hard. And, we're not saying don't be practical, don't make a budget, see your accountant when you're making a big change from maybe a corporate job to a yoga profession. Of course, you're going to do all that, but there comes a point where you have to jump off the diving board and turn in your resignation papers and see what emerges. So we're going to talk to Rochelle about that. And I'm going to give this as an assignment to listen to this podcast to all of my business students, because I think the attitude that she was able to embrace and bring to the table as she made this big life transition of leaving what some might call a stable social work job into opening Rooted, the safe space of wellness for Black and Brown bodies, I think it's something that many of us need to learn from. So I am just thrilled that she's going to join us, and let's do this. Let's talk to her. Hello, I am so happy to introduce to you our main guest today, Rachelle PEAN. And with the help of Allie Middleton, we are going to tackle a really fun topic about how to move from your day job into becoming a full-time yoga, maybe even wellness professional. But we're also going to get into some sensitive areas that we can all learn. And that is about BIPOC spaces, how to keep Black, Indigenous, people of color safe as they are working through and as we are working through our spiritual journey, our mental, emotional journeys together. And so I'm really excited about today. And I'll introduce you and kind of give you a background on both of these ladies in a few minutes. But I'd like to start with just a couple of announcements. And the first one is that You will notice in the podcast that Give Back Yoga is not a co-producer. They are just a very friendly ally. As of a week or so ago, I talked to Rob Schwer, and he basically said, Amy, we are getting back to basics. We have these 6 nonprofits that we have worked so hard to support and to bring yoga into spaces that might not receive yoga, like the Prison Project, which I know Rochelle actually went through that Prison Project program. And there's all sorts of other nonprofits that they support. So they're going to kind of move back into their original mission and not branch out so much into wellness, into yoga therapy, and into like the whole COVID thing. So I just wanted to say that, because if you still would love to donate to them, we are 100% supportive. I told Rob we will always be announcing everything that's going on at Give Back Yoga, super supportive, but you might have noticed that small change. So I think we should get right into this. I'm going to introduce Allie first. And many of you know Allie because she has been with us for a month now, helping to co-host and to basically envision what is the future of yoga and yoga therapy. And she's written a wonderful new book that's coming out in August 2021 that you can get on Amazon.com called Yoga Radicals, where she's interviewed over 30 different yoga teachers and helped us to bring it from the me, the individual, to the we. How can we co-create the future? And so Allie's goal this month in helping us interview is that she wants to expand the view of yoga and yoga therapy for the benefit of our collective humanity. She says, let's go well beyond learning cultural competency, and let's envision a future where everyone has access to yoga and yoga therapy. And I think that is an amazing vision. You know, some people are not able to think that visionary, that far ahead. Allie, do you want to just say anything about that before I introduce us to our main guest, Rochelle?
Well, thank you so much, Amy, and so good to be together again, Rochelle. And thank you, Amy, for writing the foreword to the book. The idea behind a purposeful or conscious innovation practice is truly about being comfortable with one's own gifts, even when they're a little scary to yourself. You may never have had someone to see truly how you constellate within this amazing universe that we each are born into. And as we engage more and more with contemplative inquiry, yoga being one of the many ways to do a body-centered harmonization practice, that we actually run into the miraculous and we learn to engage deeply, first from the inside out, as we know from the research on polyvagal theory and the connection to the connection. But when it comes to helping others realize that, we're introducing different strategies. And today, with Rochelle's story, when we were chatting beforehand, and similar to the way the stories are in the Yoga Radicals book, we never know when divine inspiration is ready to come in and whisper in our ears. So if nothing else today, take a little bit of breath as you listen and see who else might want to show up with you as you listen, and see what else we might engage with to help make more miracles of well-being using yoga and yoga-based strategies for our global communities. So yeah, inspiration. Thank you, Amy. And also right back at you. I'm putting the mirror up here today.
Well, as we talked about a few minutes ago, it's not an easy journey. You know, we get into yoga and yoga therapy and we think, oh, we loved it. We received it. We used it to help us heal. But then when you make it a profession, when you make it your dharma or your life purpose, it's hard work. And I know that Rochelle is going to tell us about what she's been through on her story. But let me introduce you just to give you a little background. I have a whole page of so many credentials here. we know that Rochelle is not her credentials. She's something much more than that, but it's also nice to have kind of a background. So I'll just start with Rochelle is a licensed social worker, an LMSW, who worked for Samaritan Hospital in Troy, New York. And at some point on her journey, and we're going to talk about that journey, she decided to leave her day job. And I know so many yoga teachers, yoga therapists have these big decisions to make. Can I actually leave the security of a day job and make it in yoga? So we're going to talk about that. And she founded something called Rooted, which is ROOT, and then a 3D. So usually it would be rooted with an E, but she made it very unique with a 3. And we'd love to hear about that name too, which is basically a space for BIPOC people to come and heal in Albany, New York. Some of the other things that I think are really amazing about Rochelle is that she has specialized in EMDR. And some of you know that's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which helps a lot of people process trauma. She has a specialty in cognitive behavioral therapy as it applies to trauma and dialectical behavioral therapy. So we have a very well qualified woman here. My favorite part of her bio is that she loves cats and she talks to trees, which, I can relate to that. So, who is this with us?
Ninja.
Ninja, beautiful. So welcome. I'm just thrilled that you're here and willing to speak and show us your light. So where do you want to begin? Do you want to begin with your story? Is there anything that's alive for you today?
Yeah, thank you, Amy, for seeing me and for that storytelling also of what stood out to you. And Allie, your introduction felt really good. It made me want to, like we talked about, this kind of earth connection. It made me want to start with grounding because we're opening up something in this conversation. And that way we can kind of have an anchor of where we're bringing it in, whatever it is that we open up to today. So I would like to start with that, a grounding practice.
Please, go for it.
So everyone who's listening, hello. We're just going to maybe close your eyes or just settle a little bit more into your seat. If you're seated, if you're laying down, just letting your body start to land into the surfaces underneath you. And just start to notice your breath. Just allowing your attention to ride the wave of your inhale and your exhale. Now starting to just become aware of the very tip of our tailbones and imagining this magnetic pull down through the soil underneath us into the earth. You might feel this in other places of your body, maybe your legs, the soles of your feet. Just opening up to this connection that we each have with the earth. And we'll just take 3 intentional breaths, really opening up this connection, grounding into ourselves, breathing in and out. And you breathe in next. Maybe you bring this energy up through your spine, this earth energy, connecting to each vertebrae, all the way up to the top of your head. And just being open to receive. And on that last exhale, softening anywhere in the body that's ready to let go. And staying here if this feels good, just breathing, receiving. I'm going to open my eyes so that I can talk. So when you're ready to come back, just wiggling your fingers and toes and bringing your eyes back when you're ready. So yeah, my story, now that we're like grounded, connected with.
I feel much better. Thank you. I was kind of like up there. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for traveling with me into that connection. I think that's actually my story. It's like traveling from the mind and the linear structures of how I thought my service to the world was supposed to look, and like dropping it down into something ancient and even unknown to me, always being revealed to me. And just learning more and more to drop down and trust, and drop down and trust, and let go and trust. And so, kind of my professional journey, which isn't separate from like a personal calling. I was actually thinking about this the other day, that as I was growing up, friends would always tell me secrets, things that they hadn't told other people yet. Family members would tell me family secrets. So I think the gift of listening is something that came really naturally to me, and being present and seeing people. And I had my own experience of different traumas, of seeing family members struggle with pain and not knowing how to contend with pain and be with pain and release pain. And so I just wanted to fix stuff. And so I went to school to fix things, to be a therapist. And my professional training had so many answers for how to fix things, how to label things, how to diagnose. I studied psychology in undergrad, and then social work for grad school. And it was actually in grad school that I first started practicing yoga regularly, and understood the value of it. I had practiced it before, but I wasn't aware of how connected I felt to it before. And so, yeah, over time, I'm remembering a story that the person who trained me in my yoga training was sharing with us about yoga, about dipping the cloth in the dye. You dip the white cloth in the dye, and you keep dipping and dipping, and it gets more and more vibrant. And so it's felt like that since practicing yoga, and then getting a yoga teacher training, because I was seeing clients, I was seeing families for therapy in the Bronx. That was my first job out of grad school. And I was just noticing this talking in circles and pain not leaving the body. And so there was something there that we need more than talking. And I had seen what yoga was doing for me. And so I got the teacher training. And then through yoga, kind of dipping the dye, sharing these tools with clients, seeing them start to find new spaces in themselves, I experienced a Reiki energy healing session. So I was still living in my head. They were still yoga tools that I thought I would give to people to do to fix something. And then I went to a Reiki energy healing session. I had just gone through a breakup, and I thought I was fine. And then she got over my heart, and it was just like tears. And I was like, oh, what is this that I didn't have language for, and I couldn't control or understand with my mind? And so I started exploring Reiki energy healing, and I received a training from Giselle Ravello from Vibra Wellness, and just learning how to tune subtle awareness and listen in a different way and feel in a different way. And it opened up my awareness to a lot of information that's been helpful to kind of reflect back to clients, and a reverence for that information, understanding that I'm only aware of it. It's not coming from me. So I'm listening, I'm feeling, and I'm reflecting it back, and then seeing what that opens for another person. And so, yeah, it's been dipping the dye, energy healing, EMDR, really just these different tools that are ways for me to understand, like, what is pain? How are we in relationship with our pain? How are we in relationship with ourselves? where we're not avoiding ourselves. Yeah.
I'm kind of in awe right now because I think this, what some might say is very subtle work of learning how to be with yourself and learning how to sense that pain in your body or in your mind or in your soul. Like, that's the subtle work of yoga. And so many people are out there doing what you said, which is, oh, I'm going to label it, and then I'm going to use this tool to fix that. And what you're talking about is a transformation from the inside out of the heart, really. And I love what you said about, you saw that yoga was creating space in the body, whereas maybe talking about it over and over and over in circles, the pain wasn't leaving the body.
Yes. And seeing that when there's space, and that's actually one of the, if I were to crystallize the space that I hold for people, the first tenet is inner safety. Can you feel safe inside yourself, within yourself? Because once that happens, the body does what it does to release what needs to be released. And there's actually something about trying, even if you're trying to feel better, that doesn't coincide with inner safety. Often you're trying to get something to be different. So the first tenet that I work with is inner safety. And I find that that's honestly all that I actually have to do if there's anything that's being done there. And then an intuition arises. There's like a knowing that we each have that gets to unlock when we're feeling safe and connected to our bodies. And then once that intuition comes online, then the kind of following layer is embracing the unknown, because that's really when we really start listening to these nudges, we realize we don't know. There's so much we don't know. And that's the magic. We don't know what's coming next. And embracing that, which then also usually leads back to the inner safety, because, you know, the unknown can bring up a lot of fear. So yes, that opening up that space and that connection with the body, there's so much healing that can happen there.
So as you anchored us at the beginning, right, with your grounding practice, and now with this very particular weaving of your own personal experience, Rachelle, you spoke about your listening very early on in your story. And one of the ways in which, from an embodied leadership perspective, that we love to bring in this quality of presence, which is this conceptual frame of being present to what is emerging. And so this presencing conceptual frame, which is about sensing while being present. And what is it that we're sensing? When you spoke about all of your experiments, I heard you actually anchor in your intuitive feeling place. And from what we know around leadership is that these innovations first show up as feelings. The future first shows up as a feeling. And when we begin to have relationships with our feelings, not just pain management or avoiding difficult relationships or going and calming yourself after someone said they don't love you the way you want to be loved or recognize you the way you want to be recognized, the deeper practice is that staying with, which is what I heard you actually say without saying it. So I'm trying to lift up, and you use that word revealing, right? The shruti at the top of the Om symbol is how we float up into this other awareness. And we stay deeply grounded in our listening so that these miracles continuously feed our soul path, our dharma, our sacred duty, as it begins to show up. And then the cool thing about leadership is that we then follow. We're following the inspirations as they come in. So I'm wondering, hopefully that would help people understand, listen to the future as it shows up in your feelings, stay connected to the universal life force, even when you have a boo-boo somewhere. And if you could bring us back to a core turning point in your life before you even left the job, right? The actual institutional job, and before you launched. Talk a little bit about what supports helped you make your decisions from this more embodied leadership place. Who was it? What were you doing? Some little crumbs on the path.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I love that sentence that the future comes through your feelings right now. Woo, I love that. So before I left the job, none of my decisions were embodied. I was so reactive, and I needed to be, and it led me where I am now, and I'm grateful. I was really trying hard. I was like very much in that survival mode space of trying hard, setting up my aroma, my diffuser in my office, and starting like a meditation circle at lunchtime at the hospital, and really wanting to bring my full self into this system and thinking that that was the way that this was supposed to go. And then over time, I was so tired and stressed and overwhelmed and not feeling, I knew I was connecting with my clients, but I didn't feel connected to, I felt connected to them, but not to what was happening in the room. Felt so fast. It felt like everything was so fast there. And I didn't understand my natural pace was much slower. I didn't remember my natural pace yet, but I knew that didn't feel right. So those were the breadcrumbs. Were like, this doesn't feel good. This still doesn't feel good. This still doesn't feel good. And then I connected with my now business partner, Jamel Mosley, who was already an entrepreneur and was connected with other people that worked for themselves. Nobody in my family that I know of in the past probably 2 generations is like a full-time entrepreneur. So I didn't actually have a witnessing of what that looked like until I met Jamel. And that opened something. It helped me see that it's possible and that it's not out there somewhere. It's just a different way. It's just a different way, and it's possible. So getting tired, physically and emotionally, tired enough to feel like I didn't have any other choices was actually what led me to make that change. If I could have felt sustained in some way, nourished in some way, I would have stayed. But I was looking for nourishment everywhere there, and I couldn't find it. And I knew my clients weren't experiencing that from our work together either. So I was kind of pushed out. And then I was able to hear that inner voice a little bit more once I had more space.
Okay, so let's follow this path of entrepreneurship and your care that began to emerge in yourself. And then with Jamel, your partner, some shared care began to show up, right? This potential, this possibility of something new. So when we look at this from the leadership perspective, right, this taking risks based upon the listening into the future and then following, there's this way in which we love to give experiments, and that's about finding places and spaces where you can experiment. And I'm wondering, as you made your new relationship and as you grounded and embodied with this desire to follow your own pace, really important around the rhythm of innovation and leadership, it has to be nurturing as well as a little scary, right? Because that's when we're really awake about, oh, I have to be very careful here. So would you tell us a little bit more about what were those early steps of saying yes with Jamel and then finding your locations to practice together for others?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind was what was happening was I was following my nose, this doesn't feel good, and following my curiosity. Even if I didn't know what I was going to do with it, I was so curious about EMDR. And so I took a training. I didn't know that there was that much space at the hospital to really go in depth in sessions, but I knew I was curious about it. And so I followed that curiosity. And then I did a workshop and in the community. I was teaching yoga at a local yoga studio once a week. And that was a space where I could experiment with who am I in this space and what comes through me in this space. And I did a workshop and I shared one of the self-soothing techniques from EMDR. Someone from the workshop came up to me after and said, I really want to work with you one-on-one. And I was like, oh no, I work full time. I don't have a practice. And they were like, okay, but I really want to work with you though. So whenever you're ready. And so I noticed the way that I was pushing away expansion and scared to take a risk. And I'm really grateful for myself and that person because I circled back and I was like, you know what? I can pay for an office rental and just meet with you and we can see what happens together. And that was my first private practice client. And then from there, at that point, I had seen Jamel in the way that we hadn't started our business together yet, but I could see, oh, this is possible. I had spaces to experiment with clients that I'm grateful that there was that trust and willingness to explore together. And then over time, it grew, more clients. And then, of course, there's that stability, money stories that I had around entrepreneurship. So just even seeing, oh, yeah, this is possible financially also. And over time, at one point, it really didn't feel like a risk anymore. It felt like I could, at that point, I had seen this is possible. And then I could feel how I felt in the hospital. And it just felt like there was no other choice. The momentum was already pulling me there. And so just going, just listening.
So the kosher model comes to mind, Amy, relative to how we're hearing the process that Rochelle is speaking into. I pass it back to you.
Well, I just wanted to ask, at that moment that you said, I'm doing this, it sounds like it happened kind of gradually, but there's a moment in time where you're like, I'm turning in my resignation today. Like, can you just tell us how that felt inside and the sensations? And because so many people that are listening right now also want to have that moment and are scared to have that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, wow. The date was July 20th, 3 years ago. So this is like perfect timing to talk about this. I gave my resignation like 4 months early before I left. And and this is my experience of any big change, the more people I share it with, the more real it becomes. And so I knew that it was such a big change that I had to put it outside of me in some way so that I would continue to nurture that change. So as soon as I knew I can't ignore this anymore, it wasn't even necessarily, I want this so badly, because at that point I hadn't yet practiced listening to the guidance that I get. So I was being guided by discomfort at that time. So at that time, it was like, I know this is only going in one direction, more discomfort, more feeling like something's missing here. Something needs to change. I need to share this out in a way that makes it real. And I did. I told my supervisor at the time, Claudia, who's very supportive. And it felt like a flurry of activity. It definitely, I don't know that I was present with that transition as much. And maybe that was for the best. I probably was present with as much of it that I could tolerate when it comes to a change that big.
It's just so real what you're saying.
Yeah, because it's not comfortable. Even when you know it feels right, it's not comfortable. And I think that I'm glad we're talking about it in this way. To sometimes people wait until they think they're going to wait until it's comfortable. It's never going to be comfortable.
Never, ever, ever. Especially when you're used to getting a paycheck on the first of the month, and like that paycheck isn't there on the first of the month. I mean, that's an uncomfortable place to be. But I love how you started building one thing up as you're tapering the other thing. You know, you did it in a very practical way too. It wasn't just like, I'm quitting.
Yeah. And I think everyone has different generational stories around money and resources. And so I think there's a lot of messaging out there that's like, you can do it, listen to yourself, but also like listen to what makes you feel safe and take your time. And, you know, and if you are the type of person that you really need to write it out and sit with an accountant, and it's okay to soothe your mind when it comes to big changes like this. And then once you have some logistical snapshots of what this could look like, there is a time where anywhere you go, it's going to be uncomfortable as far as that next step. There's no way to sidestep that part.
And I think by this time you already had this vision of creating a safe space for BIPOC people to come and heal. Can you tell us about that visionary idea that you had that you wanted to move towards?
Yeah, this is another powerful thing I'm learning about vision is you can know the feeling of it or maybe the intention behind it, but you're not always supposed to know what the details are going to look like. So I thought I was going to teach yoga classes where Black and Brown people felt welcome and like they could just be and breathe and let whatever's supposed to emerge. I thought it was just, and I don't mean just yoga classes, they were powerful, but I thought that was where that was going to be. And then I was teaching at the African American Cultural Center in Albany, a donation-based class. And I couldn't find parking one day. And so where I usually park, and I parked in front of this building that said for lease. And it was like a big open space. And something called me. I felt so drawn to that space. And I thought, again, that kind of experimenting attitude has been really helpful for me. Why not? I could just call, you know, I don't need to know why I want to call. I just called. And the man was available to show me the space. Why not? I could just look at it. As soon as I stepped in the space, I was like, we drink tea in that corner. There's movement here. There's one-on-one. And all of a sudden, it wasn't a class anymore. It was a space. And it didn't come from my decision. It just came from me listening and feeling. And that became Rooted, the wellness studio that Jamel and I opened together 2 years ago in downtown Albany.
So this quality of trusting is what I'd like to hear a little bit more about, Rochelle, because sometimes people say, oh, how impulsive, when unexpected actions come from friends. But what is it that you might share with our listeners about what emerged in you? Maybe some stories about what was being revealed in your awareness as you knew that it was not cool to stay in the discomfort of something always missing in the way you were sharing your gifts with the world. What else began to be in relationship with you that you began to really listen to more and trust?
I love that question because it was happening simultaneously, that I was exploring my relationship with my ancestors and really feeling that relationship as a true, solid relationship. And I remember I had gone to New Orleans and gotten a gree-gree, which is like the hoodoo religion. It's like a gathering of herbs, and each of them have different intentions. And this one was for ancestral reverence. And you sit with the gree-gree, you just spend time with this entity outside of yourself. And there was something about that opened a doorway to me really feeling that this is a solid relationship and it's in me. Shortly after that connection, I had this moment looking in the mirror, and I felt on a visceral level like, whoa, these are my ancestors' like bones in here. This is my ancestors' hair. And then all of a sudden, that listening and trust didn't feel, I used to think I was impulsive, and I was never impulsive. I was just always guided. I just was trying to fit it into the model that we've been taught about decision making and where the answers come from. Like they're supposed to always come from some formula outside of us. And there's something that opened there that now there's nothing anyone else can tell me. If it goes against that feeling, then that's not for me. I just know. So I believe that my ancestors were guiding me to go to that space. And that trust, I think a lot of us run away from it.
What was occurring to me, Rochelle, was that you might actually have a little itty bitty practice about how we might welcome the ancestors in all of us, so that from this perspective of liberation, right? This is the world and this time of liberating the roots of our shared belonging, and that our ancestors also belong, right? These are the teachings. And that as we listen to them, as you said, the bones of our ancestors right here, right now, in whatever form it takes, regardless of what color we are, the hairs, the eyes, do our fingernails grow? And do I have stuff in my ears? All that. But I think, and I feel, and actually I would say I know, having talked to a lot of people, and when we went down to the river that day on our first walk, it was clear that we were on a shared path. And I don't know why I knew that, but I'm wondering, is there something that you might offer, even though we never had met before, and that there was this, invitation to meet? Someone who knew both of us said, oh, those two, that's how this should go. What else around finding collaborators, finding others who share your care, might you share here on the podcast, or at least just now in this moment, that we have?
From my experience, and even just feeling now, this guidance of how simple it is and how willing and available that support is to us if we just ask and get still and don't complicate connection or control the connection. So it may start out as a mental abstract. Oh, I have ancestors, right? My parents, 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 parents. It may just start out just thinking that way, but then making it sacred in some way. And that might be being outdoors and connecting with the wind and your breath, and just thanking the people that came before you that allowed you to be here now to feel the wind. Or it might be lighting a candle. And like with any relationship, it takes time to develop a way of connection and conversation. And so if you're wanting your ancestors' support in this journey and creating something, then you can ask them, get to know them, and you can ask them to send people that will assist you. I remember that day, us walking, and your fire energy, also water, but that fiery clarifying of purpose and voice. And I was so open to that because I could feel that this was coming. I benefited a lot from that connection. And oh yeah, use your voice. What are you here for? It's okay to just say it. So, and that's another thing, is recognizing that nothing is mundane, that there are opportunities and magic in all of these connections. And so again, those simple moments of yourself opening up support, but then also in simple moments of life of connection, just kind of asking, oh, what's here for me?
Thank you. So this being in the sacred moment with oneself, and then extending that sacred moment to others. Yes. Or asking for those who might help bridge these connections across time and space in the way that we know happens in the nervous system when we're in a deep meditation or these non-dual states that long-term practice brings forward. So I'm going to draw a straight line, quality of listening, right? And the ways in which we connect through time and how to make it concrete and, as you suggest, simple enough on a daily basis to stay open so that the fluidity of the voice, the spirit coming out through your expression. I know you've written and I know you have been doing some talks. So what are some of the other ways that you've gained some confidence to continue to follow the energy forward?
What comes to mind is even now, I feel my feet and I can feel my lower back and I feel my heart. And so there's something about staying present with yourself first that allows whatever is supposed to come through in a way that you don't have to question it because it's coming from you. And when I say you, I mean like the core of you. So even getting familiar with that just on our own is an ongoing practice, right? But then once you get to know what that signature is of feeling the full length of your spine and your heart is open and your voice is activated, what does that feel like? And then you can just start to practice bringing that in to different spaces. I think that along with, like, I purposefully did not read too much of like any of the preparation questions. I glanced at them, but especially in my sessions too, I don't plan. So surrendering to what's going to come through you.
So, Rochelle, we only have a couple of minutes left, but there's one question that I really feel passionate about asking you. And I think our listeners need to hear. Why is it important to have spaces for Black and Brown people to heal? And I want to read something that you had said. I'm just realizing that this is when you were in the African American Cultural Center, you said this, that you really feel it's important to have sacred spaces where healing is happening through shared dance, through Black and Brown people seeing each other succeed, helping each other to create things. So can you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we all need spaces where we can remember ourselves beyond colonization and capitalism and separations. And because of the shared history, not exactly the same, but shared story that's alive in our bodies, that Black and Brown people that we have with each other. We need spaces where we can come into that remembering, where it's centered around Black and Brown people. Because a lot of spaces are centered around the white experience of separation. I'm not sure like that's the language that's coming to me, that there's so many spaces centered around separation. And even though it may seem it's duality, right? Like it's needed to have spaces that are specifically for Brown and Black people to feel that sense of unity and safety and remembering. And I think that white people also need, of course, sacred spaces, but also spaces of remembering before capitalism and like really bringing that in to sacred space. So we all need these spaces. And Black and Brown people, my experience, personal experience, and then also the people that I've witnessed holding space for, like sometimes don't want to be beyond categorization or race, or want to just be. So the way that this system is set up now, it would be beautiful if there wasn't a need for like specific designated spaces. That would be ideal. But right now, the way things are set up, we need those spaces.
I think there's so many important things about what you said. One of them being that most spaces at least in the United States, are set up around the white experience. And I think when you're a white person, you don't realize that until your Black and brown friends point that out. Oh, wow, that is true. So I think that's interesting. And I think what I hear you saying that goes all the way back to the beginning of the interview is that there has to be safety. Without that sense of internal safety, which is sometimes not possible in a white wellness space, oftentimes not possible. Without that sense of safety, the ability to be doesn't happen. So can you tell us just a little bit more about how important that safety is?
Yeah. And the safety is, like Ali mentioned, the polyvagal nerve. And it's about the subtle awareness of safety, the felt sense of safety. It's not the mind thinking, oh, I know such and such. And it's not that. It's deep history that's still alive in our bodies, and deep denial that's alive in some of our bodies too. And I'll share this story because I feel called to. There was a moment in a yoga studio that I worked at where there was a white teacher who I know liked me and respected me, and we have a good connection. And still, I taught a class, and when everyone left, couldn't find something and accused one of the students of stealing it. And the student was a Black woman, and then found that something later. And so in that moment, I was just so aware of how open and vulnerable you become when you're in such a spiritual and physically opening practice like yoga. And it just can't be risked that you would be open to anything unconsciously harmful to your spirit. As a Black or brown person, there's been enough harm. And so the precautions that need to be taken, I think we all have our own work to do. And my personal calling is like, I hold space with the knowing that I can't risk that somebody who's white's unconscious stuff that they haven't yet sat with is going to create harm towards somebody that has been the recipient of all this shit, or I don't know if I can curse on here, but
you can do whatever you want.
That's the best descriptor I have for it. So, right, that's the importance of having those spaces. It was in that moment that I was like, oh, this isn't, and I like you, and you love yoga, and you've studied yoga for decades, and this isn't a safe space.
And I think that's where the rubber hits the road, because even though so many of us, especially white women in yoga, have cognitively decided, I want to be an ally, I'm for this. First of all, it's cognitive. So maybe our white woman nervous systems aren't even fully grounded in safety ourselves, right? And then the unconscious things, the things we don't know, the places that we have not explored because society hasn't forced us to or asked us to, those things come out and are painful. I mean, we deal with this in our yoga therapy training. Nobody intends to hurt other people, but a lot of harm is done. And so, Gail Parker has written these beautiful books on race-based trauma injury, where she basically says, look, white people, you have work to do around racism also. BIPOC people need safe spaces to heal mind, body, nervous system. This isn't, she doesn't say this, but I say this, it's not like we have to be segregated forever and we'll never come into contact and never form close relationships, but it's a stage of healing that needs to happen for all of us, and then working from a more healed place together. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that feels good for me. That feels right. That feels like the way that I see it as far as what's needed in terms of spaces. And I was reading Maya Angelou, and she talks about a play that she was in, and she had to play a white woman in the play. She didn't have to, she chose to, she wanted to. And she says she did such a good job because she's always had to be aware of the internal landscape of whiteness and the different layers, the shadow, the light, all of it, in a way that white people, because of the dynamics of the world, haven't had to. And so there's a piece missing there, though, of like the full spectrum of humanity, of also the shadows. And so each of us sitting with that is really important. And what I've seen as far as Black and Brown people, not to simple, because everyone does need something different, but in my mind, the way it looks is like respite. Yeah, like a space where it's just kind of like, whew, I can just be here and not feel, yeah, I can just be here.
And maybe for the first time, have it acknowledged that you haven't been able to just be. And of course, not all of society is acknowledging this, but there are people who are waking up and willing to acknowledge what has happened, what is happening. Yeah. Well, thank you for approaching that sensitive question with me. I think it's something that we all need to talk about within our communities, even though it can bring up some uncomfortable feelings. I know my stomach is a little bit like, ooh, Amy, why'd you go there? Yeah. And my heart is feeling a little like, oh. So how are you feeling about what we just talked about, Rochelle?
Oh, I feel excited.
Oh, you do? Good.
Because these are the conversations that are needed, like going into the discomfort and not really knowing a solution, but just kind of acknowledging what's in each of us. It brings to mind some internal work that I've done because my mom is white and my dad is Black. And I identify as a Black woman because I've never been related to, I'm mixed with white, but I'm a Black woman. And I had to recently, like last year, sit with my white ancestors too. And I had that discomfort, like, what? And then when I sat with it, I was like, oh, y'all are just here. Like, this is like in this messy soup of humanity. You're also here with me. And let me see what's here. And just like curiosity and sitting with. And so because of that, I feel excited by these conversations, not because they're comfortable, but because it's like, this is important. And it's either unspoken and it's in our bodies anyway, floating around, or we're giving it voice and then we're consciously engaging with it.
As you said at the beginning, it's not linear, it's unknown. It can get really messy, and you're just going to keep grounding and trusting and grounding and trusting and grounding and trusting and see what emerges individually, collectively. You know, we don't know where this is going. We just know we have a willingness to explore and be curious.
Yes. And it feels good that we had this conversation here organically that can be heard by other people. There is no formula to this, but like being open, being curious, connecting into your body while you're having these conversations, that's all there is. And then you see what comes from it.
Yeah. I mean, even at the beginning, you know, I was raised by the parents of civil rights activists, and my whole life has been around these types of conversations. And I was nervous at the beginning, and I acknowledged to myself, Amy, you're feeling nervous. It's okay. Right. So just always checking in with the body and letting it speak to us and listening. So, Allie, do you want to wrap this up? We're going a little bit long. Do you have any last thoughts?
Well, the anchoring in the ground right? And the awareness that we are the many, right? And we're exploring in this conversation, what does it feel like to welcome the many, both in our own personal experiences, the way Rochelle has so generously offered her wisdom, and that the habits of our time are to other, and that the unraveling and the unbinding that we're able to do through conscious, consistent practice in safe spaces is a recultivation of a sense of our shared belonging, is the way it feels like to me. And that, as Rochelle said, those who hadn't been given safe and sacred space due to our historical, colonialistic, capitalistic ways of living on the planet, that now is a time, as Amy pointed out, Gail Parker also mentions, let's go and get our bodies back into the earth so that we can fully and fluidly and safely express our creative capacity to the other, regardless of where they come from, where they've been, what their training is, blah, blah, blah. And so that is a heart-centered practice. That's the compassionate practice that in our behavioral health system, Rochelle, in the 80s, we were invited to engage in when we did the transformation practices in the behavioral health systems change. And here we are. How many years later? What are we, like 50 years later? Step out. Create rooted, find the heart and then enable the heart of others. And so that disentangling, of all this messiness is what it feels like we've done today, Amy and Rochelle. And to ground it truly in a stepwise process is what I'm hearing being lifted up, that there are definite ways in which that this happens. And that we can teach each other through our own lived experience, but also through a variety of practices, such that Rochelle has shared, and you, Amy, are sharing in your trainings and teachings, and that the stories are where the real fertilizer is. So to be present to this moment, and that this is the food, right? These impressions of our collective emerging identity, even little crumbs at a time. And so this is the keep on, or whatever those phrases are, get yourself on the cushion, get out there walking in nature, hug and talk to those trees, So I just weave it together really with a glad heart, a very glad heart. And hopefully, as you both have mentioned in conversations, to get into the feet and let the, it's that old song, let the legs do the walking, and we're just following. No, we're just following. Because the spaces open up when we say yes. I weave it around the bush and back again, as usual, into the water, into the fire. But it's fun too, Rochelle. Doesn't it feel enlivening to actually tell the truth?
Yes, it feels so fun. Yeah, fun, creative. Like you don't know what's going to come up and out, and we just get to see together. I'm grateful for both of you, for the way we're all three showing up and giving that space to just see what comes up.
And I always say after these podcasts, I always like to send a little note to say, look, all of us will be digesting this for a few days and rethinking, what did I say about that? And so if the conversation needs to continue, we can do that too. But Rochelle, PEAN, I want people to find you, know you, learn about you. How can people participate in life with you, and where can they find you?
Yes, so my website is rachellepean.com, RACHELLEPEAN.com. And you can find me on Instagram. I like to post sometimes things I just want to post, and other times breathing, meditation videos, things like that. My Instagram is Chellepean, CHELLEPEAN.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Rochelle. It's an honor. And I know it takes emotional energy to have these conversations. And I appreciate you choosing to spend your life force with us for this hour. And Allie, I want to thank you for all 4 of the interviews that we did in the summer of 2021, and just your generosity and your ability to really take us to the future, at least guide us in that direction.
Amy, we are all in this together. We're just getting in and, getting going takes this consistent rerouting and grounding. And so that's part and parcel of the inspiration to continue, right? We've been given life and we all go. Let's do it.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, Rochelle. See you around.
Bye.
So let's take a moment to kind of summarize where we have been today with Rachelle PEAN, one of the co-founders of Rooted in Albany, New York. Today, we talked about her journey, her personal journey of leaving a job that paid the bills, had the healthcare benefits, but didn't suit her inner need for her moving at her own pace, didn't give her the chance to connect with her clients in the way that she wanted to connect, and left her feeling disconnected from herself. So she was in survival mode and she was pushing so hard at this 9-to-5 job. And she felt that she couldn't bring her whole self into that job. As a result, she was feeling kind of disconnected and disembodied, which, of course, as a yoga person, that's never a great thing, right? And I think many of us can relate to that. There was a point where she just got tired. She was just tired. And she decided to join the journey of entrepreneurship. And she didn't have any family models of that. So her friend Jamal is the one that she could see the potential. And she took a very, intelligent and smart way about doing it, gaining clients before she quit her day job. But there was a point where she felt she had no other choice because she was not feeling nourished. So when she made this plan and started telling people, it was super scary to say yes to this new way of being. And it's been 3 years now. But she did a lot of inner listening to her own voice. She connected with her ancestors, which is amazing. And as a result, she was able to make that transition and now is living her dream. And isn't that what it's all about? Is living in a way that we are in alignment with our true self, in alignment with our community, doing the work that our ancestors are asking us to do so that they too can heal. It's not just the 7 generations forward that we can make a difference with, but we can actually, with our work in this world, heal the generations from the past that are calling out to us to fulfill our dharma and help move the conversation, move the experience, and move a way of being forward in the world. So I am really thrilled with this precious conversation that Allie and Rochelle and I had. I think I'll listen to it again and again to give myself that permission to check in, to stay embodied, to live our yoga. Really, that's what it's really about. And so I'm really grateful for this conversation. I love these conversations. I hope you do too. And if you do, we would love for you to give us either feedback. You can email yoga@amywheeler.com if you'd like to give us feedback or ideas for future shows, or you can go to any of the major podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. And if you wouldn't mind writing a review, that's so, so helpful for us to move the podcast out and about. The more 5 stars we get, the more reviews we get, the more people hear about us, the more we can use this podcast to put messages out there that are going to help change the world in a positive direction. And we would love your help with that. So thank you for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to the Yoga Therapy Hour with Amy Wheeler podcast. Another nonprofit organization that we like to support through this podcast is the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandram in Chennai, India. They are the source for the teachings of the Optimal State Yoga Therapy School, and we are so grateful. The KYM's Mitra division offers free yoga therapy training to a large number of socially and economically underprivileged children and women in Chennai. Feel free to support them through the link listed below on Red Circle, and we also have details on our website, which is also listed below. And finally, a special thank you to our team here at Optimal State. We are truly a global family. George Mantuan, one of our executive producers. Adam Satchel, senior media producer and sound engineer from the Philippines. Krishna Panchal, a producer from Canada. Modupe Abdullahi, who does the show notes and is an editor for us from Nigeria. And Peter Morley, who wrote and produced the music for this show, who lives in Australia. Find more about Peter's work at www.zenmusic.biz. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.